Hey, Savvies, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today, we are talking about metrics to focus on other than your podcast downloads. When it comes to measuring the success and impact of a podcast, there are several different metrics to consider other than your podcast downloads. And while downloads do provide some insight into your audience reach, they don't always reflect the full picture. So I wanted to share some alternative metrics to focus on so you don't really get hung up on the download number because people can really get caught up in that and start playing that comparison game. Like, why don't I have this many downloads? I've been podcasting for 3 months, I've been podcasting for 6 months, and just comparing themselves, which we do not want. So let's just jump into it. So, first up is measuring your listener retention. So, it's really important to assess how long your listeners stay engaged with your podcast. So, you can measure metrics such as your average listen through rate, which can be found like in platforms like Apple Podcasts, I believe Spotify as well. Unfortunately, most podcast hosts don't provide this. You have to go in the individual platforms, but you can definitely find it there. But this indicates the percentage of listeners who complete an episode or like kind of let you know where they drop off. And obviously, higher retention rates are going to indicate that your content is really compelling and it's retaining your audience's attention, which is really, really important. So that is a big metric to focus on other than downloads. Another great one to focus on is listener feedback and reviews. So with things like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and things like that, people can leave you reviews and ratings and things like that. So monitor the listener feedback through reviews and ratings and comments, whether those comments are on social media or it's in like a private listener only community, or, they're responding back to your emails about your podcast. Any positive feedback and constructive criticism can really provide valuable insight into your podcast strengths and really any areas for improvement, because we always want to be improving. Obviously, when we first launch our show, it's probably not going to be perfect, which is totally fine. I don't think it should be perfect. So just keep your listeners' feedback in mind and let it guide how your show is going to continue to evolve over time. The next thing you can look at is social media engagement. So take a look at the engagement levels on different social media platforms on your podcast specific content. So you don't want to like look at it, about content that has nothing to do with your podcast. This is just going to be a podcast specific content. So take a look at your likes, comments, shares, saves, and mentions to really gauge the level of interaction and conversation generated by your podcast episodes on social media platforms. It's really great to see when people are engaged and interested there as well. The next thing you can look at is website traffic and referrals. So you want to assess the traffic to your podcast website and really take note of the number of unique visitors that you're getting, the page views, and like referral sources, aka where people are coming from, to understand how effective your online presence is in driving engagement and attracting new listeners to your website. This is really something I recommend tracking on a monthly basis so you can really see how it's performing and compare to previous months. You're probably already tracking your website traffic in general, but just do it for your podcast as well. It really helps. The next one is listener surveys. And if you have been around for a while, you know that I'm a huge proponent of doing listener surveys on a yearly basis at the very least. You can definitely do them every 6 months too if you wanted to, but a yearly basis at a minimum. And if you want to learn more about listener surveys, I highly recommend checking out episode 218. We dive fully in depth about everything you need to know about listener surveys. But essentially, if you don't know what they are, listener surveys are where you're able to gather detailed feedback from your audience. And I use Airtable for mine, but it allows you to ask questions about different episode topics, your quality, guest suggestions, what your audience like, what else your audience listens to, where they're located, if they're male or female, you know, where they're at in their business, different things like that. And overall, just gathering that satisfaction rate to gain valuable insight and make informed decisions based on what your listeners are asking for. Because obviously, your show, you want to love it yourself, but you also want your listeners to be happy. So it's a nice balance between like doing what you love, but also making sure that they are happy as well. The next one here is media coverage and guest invitations. So you can track any mentions of the media mentions of your show or any press coverage that you get, or even invitations that you receive to speak on other podcasts because they found your podcast and thought you should be on theirs, kind of thing. But really increased invisibility and demand to collaborate is going to indicate that your podcast is really gaining that recognition, and they're seeing it and what you have to offer as a valuable resource, and you have valuable information to provide. So that's another metric to track. And then the last one is conversion and actionable metrics. So if your podcast promotes products, services, or events, whether your own or others, you can measure these metrics related to conversions, such as people using like a coupon code, signing up for like a freebie or a masterclass, or even attending events that you talk about on the show. These metrics can really help evaluate the effectiveness of your podcast and driving people to take action, which is really, really crucial because, if you're just talking on your show every week and no one's taking any action, then it's not really going to be beneficial for you. It's not going to be beneficial for them. So there's really no point in podcasting if people aren't taking any sort of action. But I want you to remember that metrics alone do not tell the whole story. So it's really critical to interpret them in conjunction with qualitative feedback and just taking a look at your podcast overarching goals that you have. You really want to focus on metrics that really align with your specific objectives and use them to continuously improve your content, engagement, and overall impact. And I want to say this, if you're just starting out on your podcasting journey, then you may not be exceeding or even meeting the goals you set for yourself right now. And I want you to know that's completely okay. I really want to encourage you not to be so hard on yourself because it's a journey. It's not something that overnight you're going to explode or go viral. So I know that's a lot easier said than done, but it really can take some time to start seeing that traction, especially if you don't have like that built-in audience already, or you have a smaller audience. You can still make an impact with a small audience, but just know that it may take some time to grow, and that's totally okay. But if you're struggling with this and you want to get my eyes on your show, I am actually now offering free mini audits that will be broadcasted on the show. So you just fill out this form and then I receive it, take a look at your show live, and let you know my thoughts. So if you want me to take a look at your show and give you pointers on what can be improved to increase your downloads or make more sales or whatever your goal is, then make sure to submit your show for a mini audit by going to savvypodcastaudit.com. I'll make sure to leave that in the show notes as well, so you can go there. But the more details you provide me with here, the better I am equipped to audit your show. So don't be afraid to spill it all and let me know really what you're struggling with. And yeah, don't be afraid to give me all the details. But once again, that URL is savvypodcastaudit.com. So make sure to go submit your show for review today so I can start airing these live podcast audit episodes on the show. I'm hoping to do like maybe one a month, depending on the demand for free mini podcast audits. So yeah, if you want to do that, like I said, savvypodcastaudit.com. Would love to see your submission. But yeah, that is pretty much it for today's episode. If you want to check out the show notes for the episode, head to savvypodcastingforentrepreneurs.com, and I will see you in the next episode.